Okay, boys and girls, today we're going to do our mini lesson. Our focus for this week is adding two-digit numbers and using different strategies. Now, I know you're thinking, Miss Walls, we did three-digit numbers last week. Why are we just now doing two digits? Well, the problems we're doing this week are a little bit more challenging, so we're going to drop it down to two digits for a little bit, and then we'll go back to three digits. So, before I get started, if you don't have a piece of paper and a pencil, pause your video now and go get a paper and a pencil so that you can record your work with me. If you do have a piece of paper and pencil, we can get started now. Our problem is 87 plus 45. Go ahead and write that now and divide your paper into fourths. All right, for our first strategy we're going to use today, we're going to go ahead and draw out these numbers using base 10 blocks. So I know 87 would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87. And then for 45, we would have 10, 20, 30, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. Now, if you notice when I built my ones, I grouped them in 5 and some more. And I have a reason for that. I'll explain it to you in a second. So when I add these up, remember when we're doing base 10 blocks, you're going to want to show your counting so that you can practice writing those larger numbers. So I'm going to start with my tens. I'm going to say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120. I don't know if you noticed, but I almost messed up on that 110. So I wrote the 10 first before I wrote the 100. So make sure that 110 is 110. Now I want to count my ones. Well, it's going to take a long time to count these ones, but I know that if I put this 5 and this 5 together, that's going to give me another 10, which would make this, if I had 120, would make this 130. So then I'm going to come down here and do 131, 132, which is my answer. So then to make sure my teacher can see my answer clearly, I'm going to write 87 plus 45 equals 132. All right, so that's our first strategy, using our tens and ones. And you may be saying, well, Ms. Wallace, this seems pretty familiar. You're right, it does. We're going to use another familiar strategy. So let's do tens and ones, this time with numbers. So if we do tens and ones, we're going to break 87 into 80 and 7, and 45 into 40 and 5. Notice as I wrote these numbers, I touched the digits. I'm attending to precision to make sure I don't write it wrong or forget a digit. Okay, and now I'm going to add my tens together and my ones together. So like we did in our warm-up, we want to think about how we can decompose to make this easy. If you notice in the blocks, I added 80 and then 2 tens got me to that 100. So if I break 40 into 20 and 20, then I know I will have 80 plus 20 plus 20 more, which would be 120. Now, I kind of had to squeeze that in there. So today when you're doing your tens and ones, you might want to start with your tens first, and then once you're finished with that, write your ones so that you don't run out of space. Now 7 plus 5, I know I'm going to make a 10 here too. So again, I'm going to decompose one of these digits. I'm going to do it the same way I did it here. So over here, I took the 5 from 7 and put it with the other 5, and that left me with 5 plus 5 plus 2 more. So that would be 10 plus 2, which is 12. So now I need to add 120 plus 12. Now, last week I noticed that a lot of students, when we would go to numbers that had to regroup like this, would struggle when we were adding 120 and then a number that was greater than 10. So you want to focus on these tens. So I know that 120 plus 10 is 130, just like we did here. And then 2 more would equal 132, which is my answer. So we got the same answer in 2 different strategies, which means chances are my answer is correct. Remember, when you're solving your problems this week, you want to solve it using 2 different strategies so that you can make sure your answers are correct. Okay, so now let's talk about chunking. So last week, when we would chunk up, if you remember correctly, I want to get a different color, not blue. Let's go with turquoise. You would start with a number and add part of the other number. Well, this week, I want to show you how that can look different sometimes when you're going to make another group of 100 or another group of tens. So if I look at 87, if I added 40, that might be a little beyond. I would have to really decompose and think about how to make 100. So instead of adding 40, I'm actually going to add 20 first, because that would get me to 107, because I know that 80 plus 20 is 100. And then I want to add the other part of 40. So 107 plus 20 would get me to 127. Okay. Now, I should have notated that I was going to break this apart over here, just so I don't forget that I add each of those parts. So now I have 127. Well, adding 5, I could count up pretty quickly, or I could decompose this 5 into 2 and 3. If you notice, this is the same math I did over here. I'm just doing it in an incrementing way. So 127, I first would add 3, which would get me to 130. And then I would add the 2, so 130 plus 2, which would get me to 132, which is my answer. Okay, so when you're incrementing and you're going to make another 100 or another 10, you might decompose the number to then add a smaller part to make it a little bit easier to chunk. Okay. All right, let's do one more strategy today. I'm going to go with orange marker. So for this strategy today, it's similar to the incrementing, and similar to what we did up here, in that I stop and I look at my numbers and I say, how can I make this number a little bit easier? So if I know 87, I could do is I could make it into 90, because 90 would be a 10, which is a little bit easier to add. So I'm going to actually take 3 from this side and add 3 to this side. So all I did was I actually decomposed this into 42 and 3, and I'm adding the 3 to 87, which gives me 90. Okay. Now here I have 90 plus 40, and I might say, woo, that is not something I can just add off the top of my head, but I could decompose this 42 into 10 and 32 and add this 10 to my 90, right? So then that gives me 100 plus 32, which is totally something I can do right off the top of my head. And I know that that is 132. Okay, so I know this stretch strategy for you. So as you're looking at your problems today, I want you to just think about, how could you come back and watch this video and maybe try this strategy with your problems? Try it first with the strategy you feel comfortable with, and then try a stretch strategy. So that strategy that's a little bit uncomfortable for you, that's going to make you push your thinking. That's how we grow as mathematicians, and that's how we grow as learners. We push our thinking and stretch those strategies that are a little bit more challenging.